In this episode, we're going to talk about a learning management system or an LMS and how you as a safety professional can utilize an LMS to keep track of all the training that you conduct, even assigned training by user or by groups, all that good stuff. It's a powerful tool that you may not have considered for traditional training tracking. So that's one myth we're going to bust in this episode. So stay tuned. We're going to get into LMS in this episode. Before we get into today's topic, I want to remind everybody, if your business is reopening after any kind of closure due to COVID, or you've continued to remain open, but you're struggling with how to mark your facilities to ensure physical distancing and relay important information about safety and health as it relates to COVID, I want you to go visit our friends over at MightyLine Floor Tape. MightyLine has some great products for you to mark your floors, whether it be the stand here, the 6 feet distancing, or just floor tape to denote lanes of travel. They have everything you need to mark your facilities. So hit the link in the show notes, visit our friends at MightyLine Floor Tape. They are incredible partners in safety. I can't thank them enough for their support of the podcast. Again, MightyLine Tape for all of your floor marking needs. Hey, don't forget to visit our friends over at Healthy Roster. You've all heard of onsite injury prevention services, right? Well, that's what Healthy Roster does for those with multiple locations and shifts. And they do it affordably. So head on over to Healthy Roster, hit the link in the show notes. Go ahead and take a poke around at the website, dive deeper into the safety ally services they provide. All right, as promised, we're going to talk about a learning management system. Now, if you're familiar with a learning management system at all, you're probably thinking in terms of online training. So for safety professionals, the online OSHA classes, the 10 and 30 hour, or maybe you have an online HAZCOM training, or maybe your company utilizes online training already and has their own LMS branded with the company logo and all that good stuff. And you guys utilize that already. Now, the thing about a learning management system is that it is not online training. There's a difference between online training, the content that you're consuming and you're viewing, and the quizzes that you're taking. And there's a difference between that and a learning management system. So a learning management system is nothing more than a platform. It's a software-based platform where you can host your learning content. So in order for you to track training, that is when somebody logged in, who logged in, what time, how long they spent looking at the content, whether they completed each slide. If it's a presentation, they have to click next to the next content slide or something like that. Or if it's a video and you make them watch the video and they logged off or closed the browser, you can tell when, how long they were on, and so you can determine whether they watched it or not. So all that good stuff, that's probably what you're thinking of with an LMS, right? All that data, that tracking that you get, that's what the LMS provides for you. The problem is that the content that you're loading onto the learning management system has to be in a certain format to be able to write that data. It's called a manifest file, to get technical, and to the LMS. So the LMS then can tell you, Blaine logged in at 8:30 a.m. and spent 37 minutes viewing this content, and he completed all the slides and got a 99% on the quiz. All of that info that the LMS is showing you and reporting to you, it comes out of the content module, right? The media, we call it, actually, it's a package that is published and loaded onto the LMS. So the LMS by itself can't really do anything if you think about it. It needs content loaded onto it that the LMS will then read that data back to you, be able to show, if that makes sense. All right. So just so we're clear, an LMS is nothing more than software that allows you to share that e-learning content with your employees. All right. And then the key data about their activity and all of that is actually stored on the learning management system. There's a little file that's created. To get technical, there are file formats. There are, I should say, standards that you can publish your learning content to. It's called SCO, or Shareable Content Object Modules, or Reusable Modules, or SCORM. For example, there's PowerPoint plugins that you can get where you can create quizzes. Adobe has one, and Articulate, one of my favorites, Articulate Storyline is another PowerPoint plugin where you can take a PowerPoint and you can create animations. You can create hotspots on photos where somebody has to click. You can create quiz questions. You can upload your audio for each slide. And then you create the little player with the next button. You can lock down the navigation to where you have to finish the audio before you can click next. All that stuff is in Storyline in this example, but you can build it in PowerPoint and then use Storyline to add those enhancements. And then you will export under the Storyline tab in PowerPoint. You can actually export this presentation once you've got it all set up and the controls set up as either Tin Can, AICC, I think is another one, or SCORM package. And that zip file that you export to, that actually contains the lines of code the LMS needs to be able to draw and keep track of the amount of time they spend on a course, the score they got on a quiz, all that good stuff. All right, so you can take your existing PowerPoint, record your audio, embed the audio in each slide, and then use something like Storyline to create the navigation buttons, time limits, things like that, and a quiz at the end. And it's really easy to do that. So that actually is the content that you would then load. Some people say, hey, Blaine, I just want them to watch this video. Well, same thing. Take your PowerPoint with your Storyline plugin, embed the video into a PowerPoint slide. You can even break the video up to make somebody click next. If the video has chapters, for example, you just set it to where it's going to play for so long. You know how long it takes to get to the next chapter of the video. But if you watched on YouTube, the whole video would play. What you can do with Storyline is you could actually put, breaks in the video. You could say at, 4 minutes, 54 seconds, it's going to stop and it's going to pop up a next or a continue button to make it continue. Because you don't want somebody to just hit play and then be doing something else and walk away. So you want to make sure there's some interaction at least, so that, you acknowledge somebody's been paying attention every 3 minutes and then 5 minutes and the next chapter's 4 minutes. But you do that in Storyline. So you could take that simple video you want them to watch and you can kind of build some interactions. You can even build a quiz at the end of the video, and then you can just load that right onto your LMS. It is really easy to do, okay? So basically, why would you want to use a learning management system? A lot of companies may already be using it, and maybe HR is using it. Maybe quality is using it. Maybe legal has some content that, workers have to watch based on their role to, be a part of the onboarding process, stuff like that. And then safety, we sometimes do a lot of stand-up instruction, a lot of face-to-face instructor-led type of live sessions, right? Well, you could still use an LMS for those, and I'll talk about that in a second. But why you want to use an LMS? Obviously, you want to host your own e-learning courses, right? So you've got to put your courses somewhere so that learners can access them in a secure manner, and you're able to control who can access your courses. So only those with a work email and login, that kind of stuff can access this and be assigned this training. So it's a way to lock that down. And then, of course, we talked about tracking learner activity, which is key. You want to be able to produce a documented, a record of the content that was covered, when somebody logged in, have a roster, things like that. So yeah, e-learning is widely accepted for various topics. So, keep that in mind. It's not a silver bullet, okay? LMS and e-learning is not like a catch-all for all training you have to deliver. But we'll talk about the power of a blended approach to this in a moment. So you can choose various learning management systems. They're out there on the internet. I am not affiliated with any of them, so I'm not going to recommend one. I mentioned Articulate software is one of my favorites because it's super easy to publish content that can run on an LMS, okay? I know that Articulate has sort of their own version of this. Blackboard, Cornerstone, those are both examples of learning, like enterprise level LMS that companies can subscribe to get access. So you can do that, but what you want to keep in mind is how the LMS tracks learner activity, okay? I mentioned SCORM, I mentioned AICC, there's also CMI5. Those are all standards that you can publish your content to that the e-learning industry follows today, right? That locks down, and those are generally accepted by regulatory agencies, government, things like that. Universities, for example, for online training, online lessons and stuff, they follow these international standards of content that has been published in a certain way to ensure that it's locked down and it tracks certain activities. So you want to make sure that you're publishing to a recognized standard and that it's running on an LMS that is secure. Now, one thing that you want to keep in mind is, I get this question a lot. E-learning, oh my gosh, it's asymmetrical. You don't get a lot of interaction. You don't get a lot of feedback. There are ways you can build some of these features into learning, but this episode really, I'm not pushing this for or against either way online learning. I like the blended approach. There are some things that are appropriate for self-guided learning. Obviously, there are things you don't want to be done online. You want that interaction in a group with maybe some activities, physical activities, practicals, things like that. Obviously, you're going to want to do those in person, either on a production floor, on a job site, or in a classroom, or, some sort of training room. And you can still do that, and you can still track it with an LMS. And this is one frustration I've had for years, going back years as a safety professional, and that is that we have training going on in our organization through different departments. We'll call them departments. Maybe HR does some training. Maybe quality's doing stuff, but then we have safety, and then we track it with a spreadsheet, or we use some other methods of tracking training, scanning all the sign-ins and what was discussed and all that good stuff. And you can go back episodes, like way early on in the episodes, where I talked about how we can make better use of our training material and what constitutes training. One is, toolbox talks. According to OSHA, you really just need a description of what was discussed, right? You need a list of those in attendance. And the only signature you really need is the signature of the person delivering the content, okay? Now, in this case, with an LMS, with online learning, then you have those records, you have that log, you have the content of what was discussed as well preserved. So, a lot of this online training will satisfy what OSHA would consider to be training that was delivered, all right? But keep this in mind. If I do a toolbox talk or a stand-up talk, I want to record that. I can still do that on my LMS. My LMS, if you pick the right one with the right features, most LMSs that I've worked with in, recent years allow you to create what's called a session or an event. And that is, you give it a name, you give it a description, right? You put in some other details, approximately how long it would take, things like that. But you give it a module number or course ID or something like that. And then you can upload the content or attach the content that's going to be covered in the live session. So if it's a combination of a handout, a PowerPoint, and then some sort of practical exercise, you put all that in the description. And then what you do is you go and hold your event. You put the date and time as well, okay? And you do your event, you hold your training, and if everybody passed, you get their names, right? And you go back into the LMS, and you can add those employees to the roster for that session or event on that date and time. And then you can give them if you gave them a quiz, you can enter their score for each quiz, and you can actually submit that roster, verify it, submit it to the LMS, and it is captured as training with all the other training the organization does using the LMS. You don't have to do your training elsewhere, somewhere else, okay? Because I have seen in the past from some compliance action where OSHA comes to the organization and says, hey, you need to show, training on XYZ. Well, one of it was something that HR did. HR has a video, and it's included in some onboarding video that they watch. So that thing is included in there. But then this other thing they're asking for, I did, in person for that group at that location. And so I've got a different record. You don't want to have like all these different records. You just want to go to one source of truth, right? That's secure and where you log everything. So that's the myth I talked about at the beginning, is a lot of folks don't really understand what learning management system is. They conflate the term LMS with online learning and online training. Online training is an activity you do. An LMS is the platform, the host that you park that content that allows that content to be delivered to the learner, if that makes sense. They're two separate things. So you can look at the LMS as a separate tool that you can leverage than what you would consider to be online content, e-learning content, I should say. And so leverage the LMS for your live sessions and events. So think of ways that you would be able to use that. What are some other examples of training where, let's take the blended approach, where let's face it, there's some basic classroom type stuff. We play a video and then we go and do the practical stuff. You can make everybody take the practical stuff online, and then you hold the session later and you just check that they've completed that, and they're the ones that come to the next session where you do the online thing. It's another way to leverage technology to make it a little easier. You can open up that practical session with, okay, you all saw the video online. I'm going to give you a quick quiz to make sure we recall that stuff. And then you just extemporaneously call on folks to ask them questions. You could follow up on that and then get into your practical exercise and then log that as a session. So anyway, there are ways that you can do this. So I highly encourage you all to look at a learning management system from that angle, not thinking, oh, we want to do online training for everything. No, we want to use the LMS to just keep track of all training records, even sessions and events that we do in person. We want to be able to capture that in the same place that we have logged all of our other training for the organization. So if you already have an LMS, ask about that. If you don't have an LMS, maybe you can get with HR and quality and upper management, and you could say, hey, I think an LMS might work for our organization. We're big enough to where we're going to need to keep track of this stuff. We have some distributed workforce, and it's going to be easier to track all this stuff that way. Think about it. So look, this is a quick episode. I wanted to get into it a little bit because I do still see the confusion when folks talk about, hey, we want to leverage a learning management system, and they automatically think, well, we don't like to do a lot of online training. Maybe it's not that. Maybe you can do some online training and some videos and some supplemental training. Maybe it's not for compliance. Maybe you do your compliance stuff in person, which is awesome. You do instructor-led, you get that awesome interaction, and you get the activities going and good cross conversations in those sessions. And then, right, then you have some refresher training. Maybe it's just something that they have to answer some questions, once a quarter, or every 6 months or something, and maybe you leverage some online stuff for that. Maybe it's just some self-guided stuff that's not required, but they can seek it out themselves in addition to the minimum stuff that you require them to complete. So you can leverage the LMS to deliver that type of content and still maintain this hands-on instructor-led approach, which is what I prefer, by the way. But in today's day and age, we know that the easier it is for people to access certain information and digest that in a way that they're able to, we should be able to allow them to do that. So that's my quick take on learning management systems. And let me know what you think. Do you use a learning management system? If you do, how do you leverage it for, in-person sessions and events, if you do at all? What are some other tips that you have that you've got to share with others about leveraging an LMS? We want to hear it. So head on over to the Safety Pro Podcast community site. The link is going to be in the show notes. Join the community of safety professionals today. It's free to join. You do not have to become a premium member, but only premium members can create their own content on the community site and share information, comment, reply, and all that good stuff, and jump into the conversation. So think about becoming a premium member today, and I will talk to you on the next Safety Pro Podcast.